Hi everyone, welcome to the Banned Books Book Club. We are your hosts. This month it is on my channel, so I am Katrina Eames. Hopefully you're all very familiar with me by now, as well as my co-host. Nirali, would you like to say anything about yourself?
I'm Nirali. I'm Fireword Sparkler. Everywhere else, I feel like we know the drill by now. We know who each other are. If you're watching, you almost definitely know what's happening, and links in the description to everything.
Yep, you can find all of the places. You can find us online, information about how to join our Discord, as well as a little bit about this month's book. Today we are going to be discussing The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas.
Can we talk for a second about this cover? It's so good. It's like so perfect.
But I love it so much.
It's very good.
It's such a stark white with only some coffee stains on my copy.
This is a library copy that is very beat up.
Mm-hmm. It's well loved, these books.
For a good reason. It's a very good book.
It is. I also like kind of how we're reversing it this month, because usually I come in with a library copy and you own the copy of the book. But what a time. What a time. I think this is a really good book that really speaks for itself, both in the cover with just, hold this up again, the picture of just a protester with a white background holding a white sign. It's a really stark image. It's very clean from a design perspective. I really like it. I also like that this book is associated just with the color red, even though it's only on the spine. That's just genius.
Mm-hmm.
I just like it so much. Yeah. I guess let's talk a little bit about why this book was banned. This book has been on the list of top 10 most banned and challenged books, I believe, since its release in 2017. Which was a bit shocking because it was the most searched for book on Goodreads during its debut year. And
it was also number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list for months.
Ages.
Years, I think, actually. It's remained number 1 for a long, it remained number 1 for a long time.
Yeah. I think it broke records.
Mm-hmm.
Which is hard to do. Let me just check. Ooh. Debuted at number 1, and where it remained for 50 weeks straight, almost a whole year.
Almost a year. Wow. That's impressive.
It is such a good book.
This book was, it was so different from anything YA was doing at the time, and it made a huge splash.
Yeah. It's also interesting because we also hear stories about how it almost wasn't published. How Angie Thomas got rejected several times. One person even saying, one publishing house saying that they already have Jason Reynolds, who, no hate to Jason Reynolds.
Jason Reynolds is great.
I believe they support each other. He's on my first edition copy calling this book absolutely riveting.
Same, yeah.
Yeah.
He's on the blurb. He made it. Yeah.
He did it.
It was a coded way of saying we already have a Black author writing a book about social justice.
Yeah. And one thing we fight for here at the Banned Books Book Club is for more people to have access to these diverse books, because we know that overwhelmingly the books that are getting banned are books by people of color, books from the LGBTQ community, and books being honest about our experiences. And this falls into that, although not very many of my experiences, honestly.
No. This book has a lot to do with Blackness and being Black in a primarily Black neighborhood and being Black in a mostly white school and things like that. And we're not Black.
We're very Asian here at this book club. and that's fine.
Yeah.
It's been pretty much, I think it's been on the top 10 most banned books every year since it was released. Which, pretty impressive feat. Its current last year, it was the 5th most banned or challenged book. And that was because allegedly this book was banned and challenged for profanity, violence, and because it was thought to promote an anti-police message and indoctrination of a social agenda, which the reasons it has been banned and challenged over the years has changed gradually. When it first came out, it was banned for drug use, profanity, and offensive language.
There is no drug use in the book. Like, no explicit drug use in the book. There are drug users in the book.
No.
There are people who have issues with drug use. There's no drug use on the pages of the book.
Not even one. It is honest about the fact that addiction is a real problem that harms communities, that can break up families, that can really hurt people. But at no point is there any actual drug use.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think we see drugs this whole time.
No, because a big part of the book is that Khalil wasn't actually in a gang and wasn't actually a drug dealer. Well, he was, but it was complicated.
Yeah, I think maybe we should also have, so for those unfamiliar with the book, a quick synopsis of the plot.
Mm-hmm.
This book is about Star Carter, a 16-year-old Black girl living in Garden Heights, which she frequently refers to as the ghetto. It is a majority Black neighborhood that is impoverished and coded as inner city. She goes to a prep school in the suburbs that is predominantly white, and sees her best friend get shot by a cop while he was unarmed at a traffic stop.
Even though they weren't speeding or doing anything wrong.
Yes. Allegedly, the taillight was out. I'm going to stick with allegedly. We never got confirmation in the book that the taillight was actually out.
Mm-hmm. Also, just in general, you probably know if your taillight is out. Why does a cop need to stop you to tell you your taillight is out?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Some other bullshit.
But the book follows Star in the aftermath of it starts with the event itself, and then follows Star through the aftermath of it, of her dealing with the trauma of witnessing a second best friend die, and then the reaction of her communities to this death, and trying to figure out whether she should talk, how much she should talk, who should she tell what happened. It's a really powerful book.
Yeah. It's really, I think it's something that made a real impact on a lot of people when it first came out in 2017, and it's still something that's really commonly discussed now. One thing that is interesting about this book is the title, The Hate You Give, with the U spelt as a U. This is a reference that they explain in the first couple chapters of the book to Tupac, and a lyric of his, the hate you give little infants F's everybody.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't say F's, but I do.
but the acronym for that is Thug Life. So, and that phrase really explains systemic racism, mm-hmm. and how if you are born with people believing a certain thing in you, with like if you are born in inequity, everyone is like the whole community is ruined basically because of that.
Yeah. And it's also about how when you grow up within systems of oppression, the people who are harming you also fear you, and how there isn't a good way to build. I feel like it's about you can't build a good society while also being in a society that allows harm to come to people, particularly infants and children, and how we need better systems to protect people.
Yeah, yeah, which I think is why Angie Thomas wrote a young adult novel. It's why Angie Thomas made Star a child instead of an adult having to deal with this, because this would be a lot for an adult to deal with as well, witnessing a friend get murdered by the police, you know. But it's like Star, and it's also interesting to see through Star's perspective the decisions her parents make to stay in the neighborhood that they are or to leave. Schooling wise, they choose to leave before the book even begins, but like Maverick really wants to stay in the neighborhood and improve Garden Heights from the inside. It's just, and like try to figure out a way for, you know, to improve the community. And you know, it's a balancing act of like kind of individual goals and individual safety versus like community safety, and trying to balance that.
Yeah. And I think you also get to see really one of the big reasons they pulled their kids from the public school and sent them to a private school is that the school wasn't good as they got older. It didn't have resources. We see in the prequel book, The Concrete Bros, that it was named after a Confederate general.
Yikes.
And we get to see more of what that public school was like. And it's not great.
Yeah. And you see a little bit of that through Seven and Devante, who Devante basically can't go back to school because it's overrun by gang members that are after him at one point in the book. So, you know,
yeah,
it's not great. It's not an environment for learning.
Yeah. And I do think public schools do everything they can to protect the kids that are in them. But this is very clearly a school and a community that is underfunded in so many ways. And it's doing its best to keep everyone safe. But there are limits to what you can do without money under capitalism.
Yep.
Yeah.
And when Maverick has the ability to send his kids to a better place, he does. Like, that's the choice he has to make for his family. And the mom, I'm forgetting the mom's name, but she's a big proponent of leaving Garden Heights. And that's a lot of the family arguments in the book are about that, about whether to stay or to go and how safe it is for the kids. And how you can still follow your principles if you leave, and whether or not you can or not.
Yeah, because the thing that allowed their family to move to the suburbs was, first of all, they were gifted the house that they currently live in. And then someone's mother, who was a former teacher, gave them the money for a down payment for their house in the suburbs, along with her mom getting a very nice job that pulled in 6 figures as the head of a pediatric nursing department at a large hospital. And those are all big strokes of luck, not necessarily. It's not something most people can do.
No. And I feel like for Mav, there was a lot of guilt there of I'm able to leave, but I'm leaving everyone else behind.
Yeah. I also see it kind of being a pride thing that he didn't necessarily. He didn't want to leave people behind. He wanted to stay and help. He wanted to keep his family safe, but what got them out safely wasn't anything that he did. Because it was his wife who got the job. It was his wife's mom who gave him the house. It was the wife's mom who gave him the down payment for a suburban house. And it wasn't really about what he was able to do.
Yeah. And the thing that gives him pride in the book is the fact that he's able to hire Khalil and then later Devontae in the book to work at the grocery store that he runs in a food desert, helping his community, getting these kids off the streets and trying to lead them to a life that doesn't involve gang violence, because that's what he was involved in when he was younger.
Yeah, that opportunity.
So like he's also losing that, or he feels like he's going to lose that if he leaves.
Yeah. Man, the systems of systemic racism in this book are like, well, they're well written. They're messy to untangle, and there's a lot of factors playing into it.
Yeah.
And so let's talk a little bit about the predominantly white prep school that Star and her siblings attend. So I think one of the things that gets talked about a lot in this book when people discuss it is the very obvious code switching that Star makes herself do and knows she is doing. To be less of herself in this white place, to be more polite, to be more respectful, to not show her emotions, but appear as a friendly and happy person, even when she is not.
She says frequently that she doesn't want to seem like the angry black girl.
Yeah.
She is very aware, even though she's a child, that there is a trope of the angry black lady, and it will be used against her.
Yeah. And she also invokes other tropes out the book. Like, she doesn't want to be the sassy black friend. She doesn't want to be that kind of person. And although she does have some anxiety when she is hanging out within her own neighborhood and around black students or black kids her age, you really see her judging herself more harshly in predominantly white environments and reining herself in more and more to the point where she doesn't feel like herself when she's there.
No, and she talks a lot about the fact that she just follows Haley, her white friend, around. She just, like, whatever Haley says goes. And she and her other friend, Maya, who's Asian, just kind of follow what Haley does a lot of the time at the beginning of the book.
Yeah, which is definitely something I've seen a lot of friend groups fall into, particularly when I work with youth. It's usually not a sign of a healthy relationship if at any point someone else is making decisions for you. I believe everyone should be honest about which Jonas brother they liked. Just me speaking here. But I think we should all be okay with that. Yes.
Yeah. And there's also with Haley, there's a lot of microaggressions that happen towards Star, and later on we find out also Maya, that they just kind of let happen because they're afraid to speak out when they're not, because they don't feel empowered to speak out against this until they kind of create a little solidarity group, and it's really cute.
Yeah. I think that's really important because very clearly the environment around them isn't set up to protect them in this predominantly white school. I mean, the principal's black, but says they don't need like a roundtable discussion to talk about the death of a kid from their city at the hands of the police. He doesn't feel like that's necessary. The students organize a protest to get out of class for the day, not because somebody died.
Yeah, they're not honoring Khalil's death or the fact that he died. And in fact, the people skipping class are also the people claiming that Khalil deserved to die because he was a drug dealer, according to an unnamed news network that I'm just going to call Fox News.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair comparison.
Yeah, it's an environment where these kids don't feel maybe like they don't have the language to speak up when people say messed up things to them, and that where they're not supported when they do speak up in any tangible way, and that's messed up.
Yeah, I feel like the protest just kind of goes ignored until one teacher sees Star crying and realizes, oh, there's a kid that knew the person that died. We should maybe help her by sending her to the therapist or guidance counselor, and she just ends up leaving because I'm assuming the therapist at the school is also white.
Yeah. Apparently, when Star first transferred into the school, she went to the school psychologist a lot, which also their school has a full-time like counselor there, which is wild to me. It's great, good for them.
It's great, but yeah.
I'm guessing that doesn't exist at the Garden Heights public school.
No,
just a guess. And that's really tough. But in this place where she's constantly code switching, where she's hiding parts of herself, she doesn't feel like she can speak up. And the person who repeatedly harms her is supposed to be her best friend, who was a wonderful embodiment of white feminism, by the way. I just gotta say it. Haley is really giving us a very specific type of white girl teenager.
Yeah. That I feel like we've both experienced.
Oh, I know. I have had my share of Haleys in my life. And I hope the best for them. I hope they learn so much.
Yeah. There's especially a moment at the end where Haley texts Star and Maya stop talking to Haley. And then Haley texts Star when she finds out that the verdict was in favor of the cop who murdered an armed black teenager. Haley texts Star, "I'm sorry." And Star says, "For what?" And then what Haley says is just...
Yeah. It was like, I'm sorry you were hurt.
Yeah, it was very, I'm sorry you were hurt. I'm sorry that I just want things to go back to normal.
Wait, it might be page 433. I just found it.
Yeah. It's that late in the book? Wow.
Oh, yeah. It's like one of the last pages.
Yeah. So Haley says, "I'm sorry about the decision and that you were upset with me. I haven't been myself lately and I just want everything to be how it used to be. But the way it used to be is Maya and Star just following Haley around, letting Haley call the shots for everything and allowing microaggressions, like asking Maya's family if she eats cat during Thanksgiving to slide."
Yeah. Or like comments about fried chicken or variety of other things that were all various levels of messed up. And also
sympathizing with the family of the cop when watching them on TV. I think that was really the big one. That was like,
Yeah.
Oh, you don't see Khalil as a person, but you see this cop as a person.
Yeah. And that's also really hurtful because Haley knew Khalil.
Mm-hmm.
She may not have realized it at first, but she knew him. This was somebody that like went to birthday parties with her, you know? And that's just messed up.
Yeah.
But it's really bad. And I hope, I don't know, I hope one day for Haley, my hope is that she realizes that apologizing because somebody else is upset is not an apology.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't apologize for other people's feelings. That's not something you can do.
Mm-hmm.
You got to apologize for your actions.
Yeah. And I think it's just really interesting to see Haley's reactions to everything versus Chris, who's Star's boyfriend, who is white, who Star tries to break up with a couple times because she's just too overwhelmed by having to deal with all of this stuff in her Black community and her Black life. And then, like, she doesn't want to have to explain everything to Chris. But the second Chris understands something about her, he's okay. He doesn't necessarily react well to realizing that Star was there with Khalil when it happened because he finds out through an interview on the news. He doesn't react great, but when they actually get to talking, he can express his hurt that Star didn't open up to him, but also he can look past himself and be like, oh, my girlfriend has been grieving and has been traumatized for months. Let me help.
Yeah. I also think it's important that one of the first things we see Chris do in this book is apologize for his actions. Unrelated to everything else that's happening.
Yeah.
He messed up as a boyfriend and then apologized for his actions in his first scene.
Yeah. And what he did wasn't right. What he did wasn't right. And
right.
Star still is continuing not to talk to him after that apology because she doesn't have to forgive him for that. But
someone taking accountability for their actions is a pretty, in my view, a pretty good determination of if this is like a good person who's trying. Versus Haley, who gets called out on a microaggression about a third of the way to the book, and then gets mad because her friends are telling her she did something racist.
Yeah, she's mad that she was called out for a joke. And she goes, I'm not apologizing because it was a joke. Even though it was a racist joke.
Yeah.
She says over and over again, I refuse to apologize for the joke. Which we've seen professional comedians do lately, so I mean.
Yeah, it's a very different problem.
It's just really interesting that this book wasn't written very long ago. But some things in this book have gotten so much louder. And some things have I don't know, not a lot has materially improved actually. But the conversation has shifted a lot for a lot of these topics.
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing, so we've seen a lot of changes between when this book was published in 2017 and now. And I think some of that is because of this book, honestly. But we've seen things change in how people view the Black Lives Matter movement. We've seen demands change for what we want out of a system of policing.
There's an entire movement to defund the police, which is great and should happen more, instead of there being there were 15 cops at Washington Square Park yesterday that were all gaggled together doing nothing.
Yeah. And that money could be spent fixing public schools, giving counselors to children who need them. It could be done
like anything else.
fixing roads. There's so many ways we could use our money. It doesn't have to be this. Because we've also seen the majority of Americans support taking some of the work off of police departments that frankly isn't policing and putting it towards services like mental health first responders instead.
Yeah, isn't there going to be like a different phone number for mental health emergencies now? That's not 911.
Maybe in New York?
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, there are changes happening. And I think it's more that public opinion has shifted than like material changes. Like the cops are getting more money than ever. But people don't agree with the cops getting more money anymore. But it's really interesting with this book because Star has an uncle who's a cop in the same precinct as the cop who murdered Khalil. And this uncle is the person who was stability during Star's early childhood because her father was imprisoned. And this uncle was the person who was there, who was acting as her father figure. So Star is the first one to say that not all cops are bad. Star is the one who says that publicly in interviews and things like that. And that's not necessarily something we would see today.
Yeah. Because I think there are people who go into policing wanting to make their community safer and better, who want to protect the people in their lives. But the system is so damaged that when people go on the news and, talk about somebody who shot someone as a bad apple, they kind of forget the rest of the phrase, which is a bad apple spoils the rest of the bunch. And it makes the whole system bad. We see in this book that the murderer is not held accountable for his actions in any way.
Nope. It goes to grand jury and nothing happens.
They decide that he should not be brought up on charges.
Because he thought a hairbrush was a gun.
Yeah. Which we've seen very similar things to that before. A wallet, a cell phone,
a bag of Skittles,
somebody's hand, just their hand. Lots of things have been confused for guns, which is very interesting given the amount of firearm training police receive. You would think they know what one looks like.
Yeah. But back to like the conversation around policing. I think what's interesting that happens is that Angie Thomas doesn't really need to say, that like bad apples spoiled the bunch or anything, because what ends up happening with the police character is that the only way any sort of justice happens is that he punches the cop that shot Khalil and pointed a gun at Star, his niece, and then he gets on leave and then works with gang members at the very end of the book. Like that's what happens to keep someone safe. Like that's what the end of his story arc is in this book. So
yeah,
it's and like right she doesn't need to go as far as to say like all cops are bad or anything.
Yeah, because I can believe individual people are good and they're still part of bad systems. I feel that way about most people.
We're all in a capitalistic hellscape, so I mean,
yeah, most people, they're doing their best. But I think what we have seen since then is so polling from what we know from January 2022, is that 55% of U.S. adults who expressed some support for the Black Lives Matter movement in 2021 and in 2020 are still supportive of Black Lives Matter. We see that overwhelmingly true. Over 80% of Black American adults express some sort support for the movement. The majority of Hispanic Americans, the majority of Asian Americans, 68% for Asian Americans, 60% for Hispanic Americans, and 47% of white Americans. All right.
Not bad, though.
Yeah, all still supportive in some way. And 67% of U.S. adults under the age of 30 support this movement. So it's about...
That's huge.
Yeah. We can see that public opinion has shifted. We've seen demands shift.
And a lot of it has to do with what we saw in 2020, which is why the conversation now feels so different from the conversation in 2017. Like, the same things are being talked about, the same injustices are being talked about, but everyone's moved further. Yeah. Everyone's moved further in support of Black Lives Matter and in support of perhaps defunding the police and realizing that the policing system in America is a bad system that was based in slavery.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, I would say the height of the whip for a lot of people was in the summer of 2020, shortly after the death of George Floyd, which was honestly just a horrific way to die in general. But also people starting to feel more empowered by what they could demand from their elected officials, from what they could ask for from the people running their cities and their schools and what we need.
Yeah. I mean, this book was written before Trump was elected.
Yeah.
And it was published right before Trump was elected. So I feel like
Trump was the president when this was published.
It was 2017, so yeah. But it was written before that, you know.
Oh, yeah, so I feel final copy.
Yeah. So it's just like the world is so different, even though it's so similar.
Yeah, it's only been 5 years, but it feels like a lot has changed, even between my first reading and now.
Yeah, because I think we both read this when it initially came out, like some point in that year.
Yeah. I also live tweeted my first reading of this book. And I will say I am not hit as strongly by some of these things as I was then. And part of that is now I'm actively working in organizing and activism and police accountability and getting funding for mental health supports. That even though I knew the story going into it this time, none of the actions anybody took was surprising to me. I feel like I understand both the issue better, I understand myself better, and I know and love these characters and try to and a lot of people like them, and I want them to do what's best for them.
Yeah. A big person that really jumped out at me at this reading that I don't think jumped out at me last reading was the lawyer who was representing Star. Because she specifically was a founder of the Justice for Khalil movement in the book, and then talked to Star, but never pressured her one way or the other. I feel like in Star's household, you have two camps of Mav not pushing Star, but definitely being you should speak out, and Star's mom really wanting to protect Star and not wanting her to get involved more than she already is. And then there's this lawyer character that is protective of Star, wants to keep Star anonymous for as long as possible, but also understands that having Star as a witness who's speaking out will help get justice in some way or the other, whether that's just having other people know what happened.
Yeah. I think I do think that's really important, because as a community organizer, she's encouraging a lot of people to make these big vocal statements to show up visibly in support, to protest peacefully.
Yeah.
But as Star's lawyer, she is never telling her to do that.
No.
Which I think is interesting, because she's trying to protect Star and her privacy, and honor what this minor's parents want for her.
Yeah.
All good things, but also after the grand jury, Star doesn't really need legal representation anymore.
No, and the lawyer is like, fire me so I can tell you what you should do, not what's necessarily in your best interest.
Yeah.
Which is speak out and be at the forefront of the protests.
Yeah, which I have a feeling this 16-year-old was going to do either way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also I guess we should talk a little bit about the different protests. I would say we really saw 3 versions of the protest. We talked a little bit about how there was a student walkout at this predominantly white prep school because somebody texted around that it's a good way to skip class, which is interesting. And we also saw the riot once the verdict was announced. And that they would not be charging this cop with a crime. And on the same night, we also saw a peaceful protest in which people were assembling and chanting. That's all they were doing.
And then they got tear gassed.
And then they got tear gassed, which is not good.
I do appreciate that they discuss like having milk to help with tear gas, because it's like that's something people should know, because protests have continued and it's good information for people to have.
Right. I mean, I don't think Angie Thomas knew that President Donald Trump would tear gas people in front of a church for a photo op a few years later.
No.
But it did happen, and now all those people knew. Milk. Water is also okay. It does help as well. So everyone knows. Get what you can.
Yeah, basically.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Get to safety, get out of chemical weapons that are being thrown into any crowd. Try not to protect the people around you. Ensure the people around you are safe. Don't let anybody get trampled, But also water or milk as after you exit and get away from the chemical weapons. That's important.
Yeah.
N95 masks are good, just because there tends to be a lot of smoke in the air, or any small inhalants. They also prevent you from spreading your germs. Yeah. Man, what a difference a few years makes. Yeah, so we saw the peaceful protest got tear gassed. The riot tanks showed up because they were just tanks in the streets.
Yeah.
And the school protest at the predominantly white prep school, where everybody was just trying to cut class, was televised and got news coverage. Despite being organized by kids without good intent, without a clear line of what actions needed to be taken, or without really care for the cause and a larger point.
And that's the one Star refused to participate in because it was disrespectful. And what's interesting is that Star kind of sees herself in the position of being the only Black girl in the school, so people will follow her lead in that sense, and some people did.
Yes. Yeah, we did see some white students approach her and tell her, yeah, I'm protesting the protests too, because their reasons are bad. And like, in a weird way, Star being there kind of gives them permission to leave.
Yeah.
Her and Seven's girlfriend Layla all stepping out as some of the only Black kids in the school and saying, this is messed up, kind of gives the white kids permission to also step up and say, hey, I'm not racist. I just think these idiots are kind of bullshitting.
Yeah.
Because they are.
And yeah, it's just interesting that a prep school that has no connection to Garden Heights got coverage, you know?
Right. When they could have been also talking to the activists in Garden Heights and letting people know what was going on. And that is interesting.
Should we talk about the grocery store a little bit?
We should talk about Big Mav's store.
Because at the very end, during the riots, it gets burned down.
It does get burned down. And it was none of the other stores around it were targeted. We see stores in a different section of town during the riot get looted. But that area of town was basically empty. It was a peaceful protest in that area of town. Nobody was destroying anything. But somebody commits arson in a targeted attack.
Yeah, this was revenge for Mav trying to protect a child who didn't want to get involved in the gangs.
Yeah. It was revenge for that. It was revenge for Star saying that.
Yeah, for Star
heavily
implying who the gang leader was, who was causing the problems.
Yeah. And we see that, and that is because the family had already decided to move. It's a really striking image because that's really their last connection to the neighborhood then, if they're leaving, is the store that they own. But we also see, even though everybody in this neighborhood has been told not to snitch, because this gang doesn't give you stitches, they kill you. Multiple owners of other stores speak out and become witnesses to what happened and say who committed the arson, because they know who did it, because maybe some of them actually saw it, and because there were children in the store when it was burned down.
Yeah. And it's like, that's the final straw to stop living in fear of this gang leader, basically. Is you're burning down the only grocery store in town, and there were kids in there. And also, Big Mav especially has worked to make the community a better place. Like, you're destroying the livelihood of a community leader. Yeah. Like, it was a lot of factors at once playing into that.
We also saw their family throughout it, and it's like a little small, like this one street with businesses. We saw their family frequent other of the businesses, interact with people on the street. They, the restaurant knew their regular orders, their names. The hairdresser next door, who did not like them very much,
He was just a grumpy old man.
He was just, yeah. I don't think he liked anyone that much.
No. But I think what the Angie Thomas's writing did so well was characterize all these people in very like quick little snippets. So you like fall in love with this community that is then being actively destroyed on purpose by gang members because they're taking advantage of the moment in a similar way that the white kids took advantage of the moment.
Yeah. And I think that's really different from, like, this very calculated attack is very different than, say, the riots that was happening across town.
Yeah.
Where people heard the verdict and it was exploded in anger.
Yeah.
Because I don't think nobody that was there knew that the verdict was going to come out.
No.
Not really. And they found out and they were angry and hurt and maybe pushed things too far. But that was at least an honest emotional reaction, not just trying to hurt people for the fun of it.
And like you frequently see the King Lords like trying to position themselves and things like that. Like at Khalil's funeral, they tried to claim Khalil as one of their own when he wasn't. And things like that. So they were just like they were constantly trying to take advantage of moments to like better position themselves instead of trying to help the community.
Yeah. And we also see other gang members from other gangs or other sets of the same gang agree to keep things peaceful, to talk to the younger members, to try to like have peaceful protests. The person that pulls Star and her friends and other young like members of their community out of tear gas and into safety, who shares masks or ventilation systems with them, who gets them all milk. Those are gang members too.
Yeah.
But they're there trying to help people and keep people safe.
Which is why gangs were created in the first place. It's because, you know, the cops weren't doing anything but harming their community.
Yeah. And I think it's really about what kind of community you want to live in. One that is based on fear for someone powerful, or one where everybody looks out for each other. Because ultimately, what keeps us safe at the end of the day is each other and the relationships we have. What's going to keep me safe in my neighborhood is like good schools or safe like sidewalks where I can take a walk and like say hi to my neighbors or nod politely as I pass them because I don't really feel like talking to them.
Just lighting.
Yeah. Like safe lighting. What doesn't keep a neighborhood safe is tanks and tear gas.
No.
That's a little bit overkill.
Just a little bit.
It's a bit much. Our streets were not well designed. I don't think they could support a tank. It's just not a good idea.
No.
Yeah.
Should we talk a little bit about social media?
Yeah. So 2017 was a different time, first of all. But when Khalil was shot by the police, we saw a couple different responses to how his death was handled in various different places. Do you want to talk about any of them first?
Yeah, I think a big thing that's that is kind of in the background in the book, but is really in the forefront of our lives still, is Black Twitter. They're the ones who got Khalil's name trending. They're the ones who created national attention for this, which is always what happens. It's always Black Twitter being amazing and like working for this. Oh, hi Matt. It's still Black Twitter until Twitter implodes any day now. We'll see.
Yeah, we also saw Black Twitter when Star gave her anonymous television interview.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who leaped to her defense. They're the ones who are saying kind things. And it's not like anybody could tag her. It was an anonymous interview.
Mm-hmm.
But we saw really Twitter and the Black community using it to spread information quickly and to support people in the movement, regardless of if it was even safe for them to speak out loud about it.
Yeah. Which is not Star's primary way of communication on social media, which is really interesting too. Because she has a Tumblr.
She has a Tumblr, and then she makes a secret second Tumblr. Which, by God, what a 2017 book. I love it so much.
Yeah, that just really dates it. But one of the big things that kind of fractures her friendship with Haley is the fact that Haley unfollows Star on Tumblr when Star reblogs a picture of Emmett Till. And that's one of the big fracturing points. And later on, we find out that Haley's been venting to Maya about how she doesn't want to see all that stuff being anything having to do with social justice online.
Yeah. And I will say, first of all, the picture of Emmett Till is disturbing. Yes. I would not look it up.
No.
That was a young Black boy who was lynched because a white woman lied about him interacting with her.
And she's still alive, right?
She is still alive.
Yeah.
And Emmett Till's mother decided to have an open casket funeral so that everybody could see what they did to her baby. And that is an awful thing for any parent to have to go through. I think we see a lot of parents suffer trauma in this book about losing or fear of losing their child. But I think the friendship really falls apart when you realize with Haley and Star that Haley, it wasn't just about seeing the Emmett Till photo. She didn't want to see like links to sign petitions on her dashboard. She wanted nothing to do with any of it, but was still willing to pull in Star and Maya into feminist basketball games to stand up for women in sports. But not consider how they felt about being one of the very few students of color in the school. Because that's not someone who cares about you.
Yeah. But So it that also cements kind of Star as a character who is very aware of social justice issues, which I appreciate very early on. So it's like she understands what's happening as everything is unfolding. But she's a traumatized teenager and there's not much she can do.
Yeah. She has the context. But it's hard to step up into that role of being a public figure or a public activist. That's a big step from reblogging things. And it's sometimes a dangerous step.
And the way Star kind of meets in the middle is the secret Tumblr, which I think was a fantastic way to do it, where she posts photos of Khalil being happy and like old pictures of just representing their friendship and representing a boy who was living a life, you know?
Yeah. Because he was also just a 16-year-old kid. He loved his grandma and his little brother. He was afraid of animals. He was just a kid doing his best. And I think that's a really stark difference from how traditional media played this story.
Where all people heard was drug dealer, drug dealer, drug dealer.
Also suspected drug dealer. That suspected got dropped real quick.
Yeah.
Even before they had any confirmation that he had ever dealt drugs. That suspected got dropped from the news headlines.
Yeah, Matt says, yeah, it's noise to work against the simple and terrible narrative about him, which is exactly what that is.
Yeah. And
yeah,
I think
it's just humanizing someone, which I think is so important when you're only being fed one narrative, and that narrative is the narrative of the people in power. Which I think people are more and more aware of, that the press and police talk to each other a lot more than the press talks to victims. And now that's even a little bit beginning to change, and people are a little bit being made aware of. But
right. I mean, if we're honest, most news stories are just free formatted press releases.
Yeah.
That hasn't really changed, but police departments have PR departments. Victims of tragedy usually don't.
No.
So I think it's being able and willing to speak up even in those ways of reminding everyone that, like, Tamir Rice was a 12-year-old playing in a park. That Michael Brown just finished college, or was just graduated high school.
High school, yeah.
And was going to college. All of these small things, because we have
which
all of these little moments.
Big thing with Michael Brown was having his graduation picture. Was such, like, everyone was just posting his graduation picture. It's like, look at the successful human being, instead of like I mean, there's so much about the representation of Black people in news stories, and a big part of that is just having bad pictures.
Yeah. And what they choose to put up in narrative is a big deal. Because what they chose to put up was a photo of what was a kid holding up some money and a peace sign, essentially, and calling it a gain symbol. But I mean, Khalil probably had an Instagram. There were nicer photos they could have chosen. That was a choice someone made for how to represent him. And that was based on what kind of narrative they wanted to spread.
Yeah.
He's just a kid. At the end of the day. And I don't know. Sometimes I think...
yeah. Sorry, that's just something social media has really changed, is that we're no longer seeing bad pictures of victims of police violence, or we're seeing it a lot less so.
Yeah. It's also strange how much on the edges of the image narrative, like either a monster or has to be an extraordinary exception to the system. Yeah. The way we build narratives is really interesting, because for so much we just get a photo of whoever the victim was, whoever the perpetrator was.
Yeah.
And one thing that's interesting about this book is it doesn't really allow you to humanize the cop, because we understand that the police was a person. We get to hear from his dad about how he thought and what was theoretically that cop thought was going on in their interview. But Star, even after she learns his name, refers to him as Officer 115 by his badge number, which is good. If you get pulled over by a cop, you should look at their face, and also, if you can see their badge number, you should memorize it. That's good advice.
But yeah, but that's the only person who isn't given a complicated narrative in the book, which I think is really important.
Yeah. Because even then, it's just a person who made a choice. And it's not somebody that Star will likely ever have to interact with again. They don't need that complicated narrative from such a close story. A first person narrative, you know? Yeah, the photos we choose say a lot.
Yeah, but it's just an interesting flip that, like, Khalil got a complicated narrative because Char knew Khalil, and the officer didn't. Whereas we know that the rest of the world is getting this sob story about the officer and only hearing one narrative about Khalil. So I think that was done really well, the like juxtaposition of those two narratives.
Yeah, I think it goes really well because the world wasn't getting the complex narrative about Khalil. And they probably wouldn't unless Star spoke out, which she did. Yeah, I feel like that's all I got. Really, right now, I think it's been a good discussion. Oops.
Yeah, this book is just like, if you haven't read this book, obviously read it. It's really, really amazing. And it's such a worthwhile book. Like, I hate to say it's an urgent book because it's not urgent. It was written 5 years ago. It's just still very relevant, and I think will continue to be relevant for at least the next decade, unless things radically change.
Look, so in this book, early on, there's an argument that Tupac is still relevant. And I think they prove that throughout the book. I hope that this book is still relevant. I also really like that they pulled in so many references to other things. Like old school hip hop and music, and like Taylor Swift and Beyonce and Tupac are all mentioned early on in this book.
Yeah.
But so is like
it really establishes Star as like a 3-dimensional character who likes so many things and like interacts with pop culture, has very specific taste in basketball, meaning anything LeBron is in, which I personally disagree with, but
I have no fight in this game.
But it's like it's one of those things that's just like, she is given space to be a fully formed human being despite the fact that she has undergone all of this trauma.
Yeah. I think that's really important because everybody who's undergone any amount of trauma is also a person.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh. Ooh, you watched the movie too?
Ooh.
I didn't see the movie.
I've never
seen
the movie
it yet.
either.
Oh man. But I'm glad it showed so much of Star's personhood.
Yeah. It's very easy in an adaptation of this book to just drop a lot of the characterization, because the story, the main plot is so big and overwhelming. But I'm really glad they didn't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too.
Okay, should we talk about what our next moves are?
Yes. So I believe last month we announced that Lawn Boy would be our next book. However, we have decided to delay reading Lawn Boy by Jonathan Evison. We're going to take 2 months to read that and come back in January to discuss it.
Yeah. Just enjoy your holidays and all that.
Yeah. Have a good end of year. It is not a particularly long book, all things considered. So you'll have plenty of time to read it. But also, there's going to be... We hope you all like it. We hope you've enjoyed hearing from us about the books we picked to read this year. It's been a lot, actually. I feel like we got a lot done this year with this small book club.
Yeah. It's been really amazing. Also on Tuesday, if you haven't already voted and you live in America and are able to vote, please vote. And specifically for banned books, look at who is running for school board. What the best thing for me was reading the Facebook pages of the people who are running for my school board, because that's where local things happen, is still on Facebook. So check that to see if you can figure out anyone's platforms. Really look into what people stand for, especially if you live in a contentious district, where book challenges are happening a lot more and where things like trans issues are more at the forefront. And, basically, if your district has been featured on the news nationally, look at who's running at school board.
Yeah. That's probably good advice. Yeah, I'm very lucky. I do not have any local elections this year. I am dealing with things at the state and federal level, which are all very important because all of these people decide what my life is going to look like by deciding how much funding a library gets versus how much money the police get. I would get to decide whether I have the right to the abortion that I might medically need someday, whether or not Pennsylvania remains one of the worst states for school funding in the United States. That's all up for grabs, y'all.
Yeah.
So Tuesday, November 8th, make your voice heard and vote. Your vote's your power, and you can make a difference in your community.
Make a plan to vote. Call your friends. Ask them if they've made a plan to vote, and take them with you if they haven't.
Yep. If anybody's planning to vote by mail, you should find them a drop box or go to your election office directly. Mm-hmm. Our mail system is not good enough to get it there by Tuesday. Yes. It's probably not. It's too late for that.
Hopefully whoever you vote for will vote for more money for the USPS then.
Or just maybe take away some of those restrictions. But yeah. Basically that's it. We have read wonderful books this year about LGBT rights, about the fear of about internment camps, about religious minorities, about people of color, about Charlotte's Web. Kind of was just about Charlotte's Web, though.
It was just about a little girl who wanted to play Charlotte, and I loved it.
Yeah, it was a delight. Melissa's Story by Alex Shingo was a delight. But we've read a lot of books this year, and we hope that you've been armed with knowledge. And we hope that you'll keep reading banned books with us in the new year. And like I said, it'll be Lawn Boy by Jonathan Evison. There's already a channel up in our Discord server. And we'll have a little bit of extra time to read that because we know it gets busy in December. I'm planning to sleep from Wednesday as soon as I start hearing election results until Saturday.
Good. You need it. You deserve it.
I can't wait. And after that, we'll be doing Thanksgiving, and Nirali's gonna have her birthday, and we'll be celebrating Christmas or New Year's or
everything.
5 other people's birthdays.
I'm leaving the country and then coming back, so everything's happening.
So January, can't wait to see y'all.
Yeah. Yeah. Happy holidays, happy everything. We'll see you next year. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.
I'm gonna end the broadcast now.
Yeah.